What I find is so many people are focused on their own issues with money, keeping it, growing it, preserving it, that they don't often even have the time to talk to their kids or the confidence that it takes to have a meaningful impact with their kids and preparing that next generation for keeping the wealth and growing it.
My guest today is Derrick Kinney. As the founder and CEO of Good Money Framework, Derrick is changing the conversation about money. On his podcast, Good Money, Derrick interviews the world's top business professionals, influencers, authors, and leaders to inspire listeners to build their net worth for good. Sharing insights from conversations with prominent figures like Matthew McConaughey and Netflix co-founder Mark Randolph, Derrick leads with the approach that money isn't bad, and good people should have more money to facilitate more good in the world. His mission is to teach others how negative beliefs about money are holding them back and how to change their money mindset for the better. Welcome to the show, Derrick.
Steve, it's great to be with you. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, and it's a great topic about talking to your children about money. And I was a topic of a previous podcast that I did, a solo podcast on the topic, and I'll leave a link to that in the show notes. But one of the things that really strikes me was a statistic that was discussed in the book Millionaire Next Door, that 7 out of 10 American millionaires are first generation. And what that means is that only 30% of them successfully pass on these money mindsets to their children. Now, I guess my question for you is, initially, since we're talking about talking to children about money and these money mindsets, what do you think are the main reasons why these millionaires can't seem to communicate this to their children?
Well, think about it like this. As you said, so many people are first generation millionaires, which also means they're first generation communicators about money. And oftentimes more money just tends to magnify the mistakes that have already been in the past. For example, if I were to build a beautiful house, the home of my dreams, but I start off with a weak foundation, it's only a matter of time before that foundation cracks. And so what I find is so many people are focused on their own issues with money, keeping it, growing it, preserving it, that they don't often even have the time to talk to their kids or the confidence that it takes to have a meaningful impact with their kids and preparing that next generation for keeping the wealth and growing it.
Mm-hmm. And Devin, one of the things that the book talks about too is that, and it's a good thing, I think all parents have this, they want their children to have better than they did. And what happens is, and what the book gets into a little bit, I guess their answer to this question, is that the parents create sort of a codependency, what they call economic outpatient care, where the kids grow up and now the parents are giving them the money for the down payment on their first house, getting them a nice car, things like that. And the kids become dependent on that and really don't have their own mindset or initiative to go out and make and save money and invest and things like that. Would you agree with that?
I would. I'll give you an example too. I'm writing a book and I was using this story in the book this morning. So it's funny you asked this. And I was reflecting on a woman that came into my office and she had actually won about $2 million in the lottery. Now, for many people, $2 million is a lot of money. And you could think about all the things you could do. You're on financial easy street. Well, as she and I talked, we began to lay down some ground rules. And I was very blunt with her and said, look, once your family and friends know you've won this money, they will come out of the woodwork asking you for cash. And you need to be prepared for that and have a proactive strategy in terms of what you're going to do. Well, she felt comfortable with that. I actually practiced some of the dialogues to have. We role played some of the conversations. She left feeling empowered. A week later, though, the first phone call came in. Derrick, my son has a friend who's going to start a business, and I think it's going to be a big deal. My son vouches for him. He needs about $250,000 to launch it. Well, I used every tool in my toolbox to get her to not do it and let her know this will significantly impact your situation, but she went ahead and did it. Well, then a week later, now she wants to buy extravagant birthday gifts for her kids, begin to plan the next family vacation. That $2 million, believe it or not, whittled down to zero in 2 years. I've never seen anything like it before, but she took on the mentality that because her kids knew she had money, she needed to act like she had money. Therefore, she overspent and overshot what she wanted to do. So she ended up basically penniless from all this money. So the bottom line is this: you've got to have some ground rules in place to be able to teach your kids positive and negative. They're going to learn whatever you do, hopefully make it a positive example.
Absolutely, and that it's a sad statistic that I don't know whether it's the vast majority or certainly a significant portion of people that win the lottery lose it within a fairly short period of time. There was a question, people post these things on Facebook and say, what would be the first thing you got if you won the lottery? And I said, an unlisted phone number.
Smart move.
Because you're absolutely right. News gets out, and that's going to happen. I think it's kind of human nature, and you have to be prepared for it. But there's a difference, and I think that the Millionaire Next Door gets into the fact that there are what I call income millionaires and asset millionaires. And the American millionaire that they're talking about in the book are asset millionaires. They live below their means. They continue to save and invest, and they have a good money mindset, and that sets them for the future, as opposed to the income millionaires who try to live the lifestyle that they think goes with the money, like the woman you were talking about. And that oftentimes ends up how it goes and where the money goes, because you're trying to live this lifestyle and it's not sustainable.
Well, and to your point, in Texas, we call that big hat, no cattle. And I could tell you story after story of people that come in my office that have all the trappings of wealth. On the outside, they look like they have their life all together. I'll tell you another story. A doctor and his wife came in the office a couple years ago, well-respected surgeon. He was one of the guys voted on top doc in the local magazines every single year. Well, I had thought they were coming in because they had all this money they wanted some help with protecting it, growing it, developing a strategy for them. I was sorely mistaken, Steve. What their situation was, he was making $1 million a year. The problem was he was spending about $1,010,000 a year. They were deeply in debt. And so the first reality was, oh my gosh, there are people like this out there that have all this money that on the outside they've got the house, the car, the golf club membership to make them all look successful, but only a few of them actually truly are. If you peeled away everything, or if there was a call on their debt, they would be in the hole immediately. And so what I would ask people to do right now is, I like to say, you are where you currently are. And that sounds like a fortune cookie, I get it, but it's true. You are where you are right now. If you were to go to the doctor and you said, I've got this medical issue, the doctor would probably do an x-ray, and on the screen you would see exactly what the issue is. So you want to start off with a financial x-ray right now and say, look, here's where I am today. Here's what I owe minus what I own. And hopefully that's going to be a positive number. And that is the path for you to begin getting to financial independence, but also teaching your kids as well. And I would encourage people to be curious together. Teach your kids the mistakes and share the lessons that you've learned along the way. Like this couple here, they can teach their kids a whole lot about, here's some bad decisions we made, even though people think we have money, we don't, and how can we get back on track and not have them recreate what you've done as well.
Absolutely. And you as well have a podcast, as I mentioned, the Good Money Podcast. And I'll leave a link to that in the show notes, and certainly folks look into that. But you recently, on your May 10th episode, talk about the 3 beliefs about money that no one's teaching their kids. So I thought we'd start, talking about that and zeroing on those 3 things that parents should think about in talking to their children about money.
Yeah, the first step is to be the creator of money and not just the receiver of it. One thing we've learned through the pandemic is all of us are one global event away from losing our jobs. Is it fair? No. Is it right? No. But I think about all those parents that paid their hard-earned money to put their son or daughter through college with the expectation of they've got a great degree, they're going to get a good job, only to come out in an economy where there have been so many layoffs, and now those new graduates are competing with people who've been in the workforce 20, 30 years. And it creates this perfect storm. So what it teaches people is this: don't be dependent on someone else for your paycheck. And what I tell people is this: don't just, I like to say burn your ships, but don't just willy-nilly cut your job, end it, and start something new while you're working full-time. This is your safety net. You may not like your job, but begin that side hustle, begin the side gig, or begin looking for a new job, because we know that people are more valuable to an employer when they're currently employed. And when you start a business, you're going to have more time and more money to fund that business when you've got a steady paycheck coming in. So the lesson here, even as a parent listening, if you've never even dreamed of starting a business, you think, what can I teach my kids? Encourage them. Here's the reality today. Here's something I wish I would have done, but let's be curious together and learn how to help you start a business to help transition, not just having a job, but being in a position to create jobs for others. But if the pandemic, if it were to come back or another crisis occurs, you control your paycheck and not somebody else.
Okay, that's a good point. So that's number one. What's the second one?
The second one is what I call being an investor and not a spender. You know, when we wake up every morning, all of us have free choice. We can spend our money however we want, as limited or unlimited as it may be, whether it's the coffee, whether it's the convenience, whatever it may be. But when it comes to making some of these bigger ticket purchases, so many people look at them just as a purchase, but not as an investment in their future. Here's an example. Let's say there's a graduate that is about to get their first apartment. Well, you could buy all new furniture and completely deck out that apartment, okay? Or you could go on Craigslist or Facebook Marketplace and find some quality furniture, probably 25% of the cost, and furnish that, because we know those are diminishing value items. That couch is not going to appreciate in value. Then you could take the difference of that and begin to buy things that invest. Maybe you buy some stocks. Maybe you buy into a real estate mutual fund where everybody pools the resources together. So each decision, one by one, either helps grow your net worth or reduces it. And it's important just to think of every dollar you spend because you worked hard for it. And what I would ask everyone to do is they look at that dollar bill physically and say, I want you to work as hard for me as I work to create you. That's the whole goal here, is to think of yourself as the CEO of your money. And what I find is I talk to people who do that even 3 months, 6 months down the road, they're ingraining in their brain how to make better, longer term decisions. And if an emergency comes up or, God forbid, another issue, they've got money available that they can fall back on. And people that pay cash and think like that tend to make smarter decisions.
And that raises a good point. It came up in the Millionaire Next Door book, where you say buy that furniture on Craigslist at 25% of the value, because it's not going to appreciate. Most millionaires buy used cars, to let somebody else take the equity hit, the depreciation on the car, and you come in and pay a lot less for it after a couple of years, but buy it off a lease from somebody else. And that idea of investing in something it's not going to appreciate in value, but save that money and then put the savings into something that will appreciate in value.
That's so important. And it's also good to have a game that you play with yourself. I mean, as kids, we all were incentivized by something. Hey, if you clean your room, here's a treat, or you do this. And so even as adults, we want to think like children when it comes to our money. And what I want you to do is set a goal that says 3 months from now, if I'm able to have something to show for my money, if I've saved $1,000 or I've reduced my debt by X amount of money, or I've invested this amount into this mutual fund, then treat yourself. Now treat yourself with something you pay with for cash, not credit, of course. But the goal is to set goals and milestones for yourself to retrain yourself and reward yourself. It's very, very important. When push comes to shove, we always want there to be more month left. Well, let me rephrase that. There's often more month left than there is money. And so if people can start ahead of time saving money, have a plan for it, that's going to be the key.
Hmm. Absolutely. And what's the third thing?
Well, the third one is to be a confident wealth builder.
Mhm.
And I want to hone in on the word confidence, Stephen. What that means is that you have a strategy in place that you believe in. So many people I talk to, they work hard, they get their paycheck, they spend it, and whatever is left, they then think about, well, maybe I'll invest that. Maybe I'll give that. Maybe I'll do something with that. What I want to do is flip that script and say, have a plan for every dollar before you earn the dollar. And here's what that looks like. A couple of concepts. One is called set and forget. So if you have access to a retirement plan at your office, you want to already have it set up where a certain percentage comes right out of your paycheck before you can think about it directly into that 401k, that 403b, that IRA, etc. So what that does is you're paying yourself first. And then we want to set up a specific dollar amount that automatically goes into your investing account. That may automatically purchase things like the S&P 500, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, whatever that diversified portfolio is. Every dollar already has an assignment. It'd be like if you went to work and every day your boss had no idea what we were going to do. There was no plan. You had to formulate a new plan every day. That would be how chaotic it would be to think about, I'm going to make my money, and then every dollar have to figure out where it's going to go. So it's very motivating, but also we know if we go into the brain, the subconscious mind likes order. It likes to have a plan, likes to have a strategy, and the more that you can already have one laid out, the more you're going to accumulate the wealth. For example, if you were to say, I want to pay off $1,000 of debt in the next 30 days, and you got laser focused on that, wrote down everything you spent, everything you saved, my guess is you'd be about 90% further along than most people because you have a target you're specifically aiming for. So when you've got a target, that leads to confidence.
And you raise that point that the saying, pay yourself first, and learn to. I know my wife with her job, and she has a government job, and through they have the equivalent of a 401k, and that money disappears. We never see it.
Right.
And so you don't even think about it. Okay, this is how much her net pay is every paycheck, and this is what we have to spend, and the money's basically out of sight, out of mind. And you learn in a lot of ways to live without it because you're paying yourself first in this long-term plan that you have. And the other expression that you're talking about is give every dollar a job. So know exactly what it's doing, and that goes to budgeting and everything else. You're paying yourself first. All right, now you have your net pay, and what is each dollar going to do for you, going from there, and planned spending.
Yeah, that's the key right there is the word planned. And, I'll share another story with you. Let's say, for example, someone gets their first job out of college. Let's say they're making $50,000 a year. One thing that we know is that people's expenses quickly reach the level of their income. And it's very, very, very important, especially for parents that teach their kids, look, try to live on maybe half of your income, maybe 60% of it. And the goal is that you're saving 10 to 15%. I'm a big proponent of giving 10% because I feel like that helps you make better, smarter decisions, help you make the world better. And also have some cash built in for opportunities. One thing that people get ingrained early on is I have a job, therefore I have a job. Use that job to create wealth for yourself. And I want you to think very strategically. And what I'll tell people is, look, you are the CEO of your dollars, whether that's $10,000, $20,000, whatever your income may be. And you want to be very strategic because the government is not going to give you a retirement rescue loan. It's not going to rescue you from all of your debt. That is yours to take care of. So people that are very strategic about it and set, whether it's a 10-day goal, 30-day goal, a 6-month goal, all of those give you markers to work toward. As I write my book right now, I've got 1 month to go before I need to get it to the publisher. So I'm on a very regimented daily diet of here's the writing I must do before I can do my other stuff. It's required first, optional second. And I think, especially for parents right now, to talk with their kids, if they're watching a show, helping them make decisions, for example, Steve. For example, we watched a show the other night, and it was on Shark Tank, for example. And I was talking to my kids about, okay, if it were you, if you were the person investing, what would you do? Because I want to engage their mind in thinking about whether you have a lot of money or not. We all are where we are, and that's where we start. And so if you can become a savvy investor and a strategist, that can really help pay dividends for you down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in talking about the conversation with your kids about money, obviously that conversation is different depending upon the age of the child. And hopefully you start early at a young age and step them through the process as they get older and able to understand more involved concepts and the nature of the real world. Why don't we talk about a little bit about, let's say you're the parent of a child that's 5 or 6 years old. They've just gone into first grade, from 5 to 9 or 10 years old. What kind of conversation should you have, and how should you start with that young child in talking about money?
Well, what you want to do is make it very practical and fun. And I'll tell a story with you. I gave some advice to some grandparents that came in the office that wanted to help their grandchild learn about money. And what I talked about with them was, do you often give them birthday money? And they said, yeah. So when's their birthday? Well, it turns out the kid's birthday was about a month away. I said, why don't we do this? Why don't you, whatever you're going to give them, they were going to give him $20 for his birthday gift, which was great. And why don't you then take him to lunch and talk about what you can do with that $20? And so what they did is they then spent some time at lunch. They picked his favorite restaurant. It was a great burger place. So he got something out of it and was in an environment where he wanted to receive advice. That's really the first key, is do something where it puts your kid at ease to hear from mom or dad or from grandma and grandpa. And they talked about, look, let's gave it to him in ones. So let's take $2 and let's pick something that you believe in, that there's a cause you like, there's someone you want to help, the church, whatever it may be. And then let's take $2 of these dollars and let's do what's called investing it, where let's say you put it somewhere where it could actually make more money. And they gave him some ideas, and they talked about, look at, for example, the shoes you're wearing, the shirt you're wearing. All of those are companies that you could invest in, and we'll help you with it. And what it did is it gave them some context of how does money really work, and they did it through the envelope system. So he then began, he had $16 afterwards that was his money, $2 toward giving, $2 toward investing, and they began to do that on a regular basis. And so as that child got allowances down the road, that envelope system was intact. And so the grandparents played a real active role in helping their grandson really become practical with money, because so much of money is, hey, just invest it. And we all assume that we know what that means, but most people don't.
And one of the things, I was having a conversation yesterday at a Memorial Day picnic and talking about a friend of mine who wrote a book on parenting called The Language of Parenting. And his kids would come up to him and say they want something. And he would say, what's the magic word? Well, most parents hear that. We know what the magic word is. The magic word is please.
Please, right.
Well, no. In his family, the magic word was because. Well, you want the latest iPhone. Because. And the child is forced to think the practical aspects of it. Why do you want it? Why is it important? What can you do with it? Things like that. Is this something that's frivolous, or is this something that's important? And you obviously have to follow through. And if the child makes a good case for it, then they should get it, or maybe pay some money towards it from their allowance, and you help them so that they're sort of invested in the process. But it gets them thinking more practically, and not just, you win the lottery and you just start buying stuff because you want it, and you never ask because or why.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think it's important for us to teach our kids how to make their own decisions. I call these low-cost probes. And what that means is, let's say that somebody takes their $20, which they could, it's their birthday money, and just spend it. It's always nice to follow back up a week later and say, hey, how much enjoyment did you get out of that $20? Well, I bought this or that. Well, is it still available? Is it still around? Or are you still getting enjoyment from that? And it begins to cause them to think about, no, I just bought candy with it, or I bought this or that, I bought a shirt, and that was the end of it. That was the end of that life cycle. And so teaching our kids how to extend the life cycle of their money is very, very important. And what I find, and even when you think about athletes today, and this may get up when kids are a little bit older, so many athletes these days now are living off their endorsement money and they're saving what they get paid. And that concept can be very powerful to think about. Look, what if you began to save a bulk of what you earn, but you then lived on your investment income or a side gig or this, and it just forces the issue. And we're oftentimes then at the dinner table, the discussions are not just, hey, what are we spending or what's going on, but talking about strategic investing. And I'll tell you a story real quick. One way I get my kids' attention the most, Steve, when I come home from the office and we're talking at dinner, those kids that are there, and we talk about our day, go around the table and so forth, and they say, well, Dad, how was your day? If I just say, well, my day was fine, or I made some calls or did this or that, well, we quickly move on. But if I say to them, I made one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made today, and I pause, suddenly everybody's eyes are on me. I have the entire table's attention. And I can tell them, yeah, I picked an investment that was pretty aggressive for my own account and lost some money on it. Here's the lesson I learned. Well, they retain that. And what it does is it humanizes Dad, A. B, it gives them a practical lesson of, oh, wow, people make mistakes, and 3, we can learn from their mistakes. And so that's one thing I've really harp on my kids about is, look, if I make a mistake, here's why I did it, but I don't want to shy away from that. I want to keep taking the risk, because inside of risk is always mistakes. And I want them to know that those two correlate really well together. But typically, the more risk you're taking, calculated, the more money you're going to make over the long term as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so that child is a little older now. They're going into maybe entering into middle school. They're maybe 10 to 14 years old, not quite teenagers. How does the conversation change and evolve, and how do parents talk to children of that age about money?
Yeah, and again, it's going to vary with each family, but what I have found, some of the success stories have been engaging some kind of an allowance at this point. But you want to make sure it's not just here's money to spend. It's better to tie it to chores around the house. That way they see that there's work involved. And work, as we know, is that nasty 4-letter word that so many people want to avoid. But if we can instill those values in our kids, if we can teach them that work is good and it pays to do work and it generates income at a young age, that can be very strategic in terms of their thinking about money. I know when I was 15, my first job at a grocery store, cleaning the bathrooms was one of the worst jobs, but it actually taught me you've got to be willing to be humble and work hard, and that's how to move up the ranks as I began to work my way up the ranks at that grocery store. So when you think about middle school, it's all about tying money to value received. And value received is, look, if you clean your room, here's X amount. If you empty the dishwasher, here's X amount. If you fold the towels, here's X amount. And teaching them what I call required first, optional second. Because inevitably, they're going to get that phone call, hey, I want to go to so-and-so's house. I want to go outside and play. I want to do what's fun. I want to play Xbox. Well, have you done the required things first? Have you done the dishes? Have you folded the clothes? Have you cleaned your room? Yes, then go. You build trust with me knowing that you now focus on what's most important, especially to mom and dad, because ultimately you might be working for someone's mom and dad, and you want to make sure they know you're going to take care of required first, optional second.
Right. And of course, there needs to be a transition from that at some point, because although it's important to tie those together and that you shouldn't expect money to just be handed to you, it should be associated with some sort of work. At the same time, as adults, you still gotta clean your room and wash the dishes and everything else, and you don't get paid for it. So you don't want to have that expectation with the child as it gets older that they'll get money for doing something that they really have to do in life anyway, and at some point they're not going to get paid for it.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And that age is going to vary with each family. I know in our family it was right around probably 12 or 13, right when they were on the cusp that they could begin getting a job at age 15 or 16. but beginning to have those discussions about, look, we're teaching you how work works and we're incentivizing you to do it. But keep in mind, and we've got a family of four kids, that work is part of our family. That's an expectation in the Kinney family. And they bristled at that at first, and we got some grunts and groans about it, to be expected. But now they realize, look, we're training you and teaching you for the real world. And one of the words that I wanted to define for them early on was the word entitlement. And that was simply the word that meant I should be expected to receive certain things just because I am who I am. And the lifestyle they've got is different than I had growing up. We all tend to just, whether it's purposeful or just by osmosis, they get a better lifestyle than I had. But I want to make sure that they are learning the value of hard work and the fact that as they get older, they sort of have a dollar sign above their head. And what that means is that sometimes you're going to get a job where you feel like I'm getting paid what I'm worth. Other times you may question, I am so underpaid, I can't believe this. The bottom line is that you're getting paid currently what you're worth in this moment. So it's up to you to then decide, how do I want to do that? Can I add more value? Can I talk to my boss about what would it take to make more money? Because the value they see in me right now is determined by my current paycheck, as hard as that is for me to hear.
All right, so we're still dealing with it, sort of the preteen, and we've associated money with giving value and work and earning that money as it comes in. Are there any other lessons at that age that should be communicated?
Well, one thing I think it's important, especially even in middle age, is, or let me say that again, even when we're in, middle, what would you say, middle teens, Steve, let me clarify with you, what age are you talking about here now, just so I can get a clear...
Sure. 10 to 14. They haven't quite gone into high school yet. They're not full-on teenagers.
So 10 to 14 is a great age. My wife and I always joke that we've always thought to ourselves, every year it gets better. So many people think about the terrible twos and the terrible teens. We just always said the challenges are going to be harder, but our responses are going to be better because we're training them to be young men and young women. And part of that comes around money. So at 10 to 14 is such a critical age where they've got the cell phones, there's a lot of peer pressure. And that's really one thing I would focus on right now, is helping them manage not just the physical peer pressure of what am I wearing, what house do I live in, how am I viewed, but also how do they spend their money in the game of comparison. One thing that we know is, as someone once said, that comparison is the thief of joy. And especially for this age group, they can define themselves by how they look and how they dress. And it's very important for them to understand, just because someone dresses really, really well doesn't make the person. It doesn't even make them successful. And so I want to make sure that you look good, that you are articulate, you can communicate well, but that you're empathetic and that you can get along with others really, really well and can work in a team environment. That's where the team sports, I think, are helpful, just to help mold people's viewpoint that this is no longer the me show, this is the we show. We know the me show gets canceled at some point. The we show goes season after season, and it's really the best TV show on the air.
Okay, so now this preteen is now a teenager in high school. We talked a little bit about how at that point we're transitioning away from the idea of money for chores, because these are things you do in life anyway and you don't get paid for it. What other conversations should parents be having with their children at that age about money?
Well, what I am doing right now with our kids is talking about investing. And we're talking even about the Bitcoin, the Ethereum. These are things that are in the news right now, but we're talking about, as the economy recovers, what does that mean? And I'm asking them to look around, hey, what other phones are your friends using? What shoes are they wearing? What clothes are they wearing? What cars are they driving? All of those are ways to be aware of where are things growing, because if your friends are using those and buying those, a lot of other people are as well. But now what I'm thinking about and talking to them is their work ethic. And I'll tell you a story. I had a client come in the office and he wanted me to talk to his son about getting prepared for his first job. And so brought his son in. It was a good client, just part of the family planning, if you will, that we wanted to help them with. And I began to ask his son, I said, so when you were in college, what are things that you were involved in? And he said, nothing. And I said, whoa. You mean to tell me that you went through 4 years of college, you were involved in nothing? He said, yeah, my dad just said, just go to school and just have fun, enjoy the experience, everything would take care of itself. Mm-hmm. And I said, so you weren't involved in any activities, you did nothing volunteer-wise, no leadership? And he said, no, nothing. I said, well, let me ask you this. How will your resume stand right now against other college graduates who did not one internship, but two, but three, that were in leadership positions? In other words, people want to hire people that someone else already took the risk on. They don't want to be left holding the bag wondering if you're going to be the person that they thought you would be. And what I told them, and it irritated his dad, but I said, look, your son may need to take a little bit of a gap year to build up some leadership experience. He can still apply for jobs, but I think he may find that the pickings may be lean because he was going out there competing with people who had already sort of polished their sword, if you will, in terms of doing battle and getting ready for what was happening. And what he did was he took about 6 months, took some classes in junior college, got involved on the junior college campus in some leadership positions, began to do some volunteer work. 6 months later, got a much better job. Mm-hmm. And what was interesting was those employers that he talked about said, Mr. Kinney, as he called me, they really liked the volunteer work and the leadership that I had done, so the advice was spot on. And so what I would tell people is it's not always just about making money, but it's, can people view you as a team player? Mm-hmm. Are you part of the we show and not just the me show?
Mm-hmm. And that doing that as a teenager and everything prepares them before they're in college and before they make that mistake that you described with this kid who didn't do anything in college at all. It gets him with that mindset that when they do off to college, they are going to be better prepared to compete in the job market when that ultimately happens when they graduate.
Well, and that's the key right there, especially just having good habits. Mm-hmm. When we think about brain science, I'm no brain expert, but I know that our habits create grooves in our brain and they become our default. For example, if we face stress or pressure, there's a certain default way that we think about things. And what I think it's important for people to do, especially as we emerge from this pandemic, it's almost a giant reset button that all of us get to press. And we're all rethinking, boy, what would I have done differently if I'd been better positioned financially? For example, about 10 years ago, I met with a group of executives and they had quite a few stock options. And the market was red hot, Steve. And what I told them was, look, you want to have something to show for the gains you're making. What I encouraged them to do was to take about 10% every year off of their gains to whittle down how much stock they had in that one company so that if it dropped, they had something to show for it. Mm-hmm. They got greedy. They said, Derrick, I know that sounds reasonable, but we're going to keep going. Big market drop. They lost almost all their gains. And the lesson that we lamented about was, what could you have done if you had listened? You could have paid off your house, paid off your car, been out of debt, had plenty of money for savings, and had more money to invest when the market dropped. And it's important because this generation right now has seen their parents struggle so much financially. We've seen the Great Recession, we've seen the pandemic. All of those things have had a dramatic impact and a groove put in their brain. We now have to convince younger people to actually invest. And I think the way to do that is to make it make sense to them. And this, I think, drives at your deeper question is, how do we get people to save but also understand and want to do it? I can say to people, look, save 10%, give 10%, but if it doesn't connect with an emotion they have or a reason for them, it's not likely to last. But if you say, look, think about a cause you believe in, think about a wrong you want to right or an injustice you want to help with, they can make that tangible. Now they want to give 10% because they can see the impact they can have, even if it's in their local community. If I were to say to them, hey, picture the house you want to have or the car you want to have, how would it feel to be one of the first people you know in your friend group to have those things? And you attach emotion to it, and it talks about how good they feel about it. They're far more likely when things get hard and when things get tough to keep saving and keep working because they've attached an emotion of how good it will feel to accomplish those things.
Okay, so now we've got the teenager who is learning to get more involved in high school activities, leadership positions, on and on, things in their community to get them ready for college. Now you have the 18-year-old. They're now legally at least an adult, if not
Right, right.
emotionally or mentally. And they're either going off into the world or they're going to college. What's the conversation at that point with the child, which is obviously the last one you're going to have, really, because to some extent they have to live and implement what they were taught. What's the conversation with the 18-year-old?
Well, now it comes down to two things from my perspective, and that is how will college get paid for,
Mm-hmm.
and how will you handle credit cards?
Mm-hmm.
Credit cards are like that aisle of temptation when you go to your favorite retail store and you think you're
Mm-hmm.
just going to check out and pay for your item. Well, you've got to weave through all these things that add the candy and the extra iPhone charger, all that stuff you weren't planning
Mm-hmm.
on. And credit cards are something that, especially at an early age, so many students get pelted by those. So what I want to do is prepare my kids that A, you will receive them, and B, it'd be good to pick a credit card, but involve us in that discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Because whether it's to build up cash rewards or to use it for vacation, whatever that may be, this is real life and it's a way to help them build their credit score. So I'm not just only use cash. I'm not that guy. I want to make sure that you can function in the real world, but let's walk alongside you through this process. The
Mm-hmm.
next big thing is, how will college get paid for? And I call this an adult conversation. So many parents, I find, there is this shock and awe that when their kids are about to go to college, a bomb gets dropped on them that says, okay, you now have to pay for all the college yourself. It's up to you to borrow the money to do this. And the son or daughter is caught completely off guard because there wasn't this discussion years earlier in terms of what each of our roles was going to be. So what I want to teach my kids, and I help others with this as well, is don't fall prey to the comparison game as parents, that my peer pressure now is where do my kids go to school and the status that gives me as mom and dad. I want to send my kids to a place where they get a good education for what they want to do, but also they can leave there as close to being debt free as possible. I know
Mm-hmm.
with our kids we use what we call a half and half program, where
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the hook for half. They then pay for half because I want them to have the proverbial skin in the game. I want them to
Right.
make economic decisions based on, you're going to graduate with some debt. Is that what you want? And is this the school that will afford you the ability to have the least amount of debt and get the best degree possible? Myself, I squeezed 4 years into 6. I worked about 30 hours a week during school, and I was valuable because I had a work ethic when I graduated, but with very, very little debt. Today, there's so much handed to many people that if they don't have those hard lessons now, it can be very difficult to just graduate and think this debt will magically go away, which we know doesn't happen.
Yeah. You were talking about credit cards, and that's a big lure. I mean, there are a lot of credit card companies that, through the schools and everything, get the kids on the credit cards, or the parents say, okay, you can use the credit card for this, that, and the other thing. And what's interesting is, and hopefully it's the start of a trend, and, I'm not, it's not they're not a sponsor of the show or anything else. I'm not trying to plug them, but Apple with their credit card now. They've got a newer program. They came out with a credit card a year or so ago, but now they have this family or joint card where you can put other people onto the card, even set spending limits for each of those people, and that gets reported onto their credit. So you have the college students say, okay, we put you on the card, you have a spending limit of $1,000 or whatever it is, and they use the card and it gets paid, and they start not only learning responsibility with the credit card and with credit, but also starting to build their credit score so that when they graduate college, it makes it easier to, whether it's get a mortgage or any number of things that you need a good credit score for.
Well, and I think that's important because it makes it tangible. And I think we're going to see companies like Apple, like Amazon, those well established brands that, especially through COVID, people have become more acquainted with because of how easy it was to do business with them,
Mhm.
align themselves further with their product offerings. So when a credit card comes out or a phone plan, all of those are key things. And what I would say to people is this: you want to think of it like this downward slope where
Mhm.
when the kids go to college, they're very, very dependent on you. And the goal is over that time, they're becoming more and more financially independent.
Mhm.
And they recognize why they should do that. We know that crises may come up. The average person, psychologists tell us, has 3 to 4 crises per year, interrupted by the occasional emergency, which is a lot. That means you're either going into crisis or coming back out of it. And teaching our kids that that's a normal part of life will help them when adversity comes, not completely derail them.
Mhm.
And so it's very, very important to teach them about here's how the phone plan works. Here's how our electricity bill works. Here's how the water bill works. All these things where they begin to see when I'm on my own, those are expenses I begin to need to navigate as well, can be very, very encouraging. Now, one parent actually told me a story. What they did was to really create some good lessons for their kids is they showed their kids their utility bills, whether it was their water bill, electric bill, their gas bill, their phone bill. And they said, if you can do the research and help us save money, we'll give you 10% of the savings as a reward. Okay? Well, what that did was that educated their kids on how the bills worked. It saved mom and dad money, and
Mhm.
it also gave a financial reward to the kids, and it taught them all lessons of, hey, the less we spend on these types of expenses, the more money we can save. So it was a valuable lesson for everybody involved.
Oh, that's terrific. All right. Well, this is some great discussions on how to talk to your kids about money, which is important these days. Some great stories and things for our listeners to consider as they raise their children. So appreciate having you on the show, Derrick. And I'll leave a link in the show notes to your website and some of your resources as well as your podcast. And I'm sure we'll have you back on another topic someday.
Steve, thanks so much. It was great to be with you. Always a joy to be here. Thank you.